Think of your typical nature lover and you might picture old waterproof jacket, binoculars, gaiters. You get the idea. But Sam Smith has been to Plymouth to visit a very unusual wildlife fan who's determined to make a real difference to nature.
Sam Remmer is one of the UK's top pole dancing instructors. She teaches it for fun and fitness. Pole dancing in studios and clubs we know about, but pole dancing outside, that has to be a first.
It's really nice to get out of the office. I spend a lot of time in the studio, and as much as I love teaching, actually being indoors in the studio isn't the same as being out in the fresh air. So it's a contrast to having your face in a computer. Fresh air, you've got loads of wildlife, the sun's out. Why wouldn't you want to be outdoors?
The land that Sam and her friend Pan are exercising on isn't any old countryside. Part of it came up for auction this spring after a developer was refused planning permission. Sam and her husband Sid now want to create a wildlife paradise here.
We've been looking for land for ages and have had an active interest in wildlife, and this has just brought everything together right on our doorstep. It was all really sudden. We were at a council meeting on the Tuesday evening and the local residents were talking about the fact that the developer owned this piece of land, that it was going to be auctioned off, and it was going to be auctioned off the Thursday, which was 2 days later. So we went and looked at it on the Wednesday, just fell in love with the place and went to the auction Thursday morning and won the auction. We walked out of the venue and were just like two giggling school children. We're kind of screaming and dancing and just like, we bought a wood. It was amazing.
They've bitten off a big project, having to hack their way through in places just to get access. But as Sid told me, there's a serious purpose.
We realise, of course, it's not just an asset, it's not just a nice thing that you're taking on, it really is a responsibility. We have a laugh, we enjoy it, but these animals here, they need us now to look after them, because if we don't, there's nobody else will.
The land borders Trefusis Park in Plymouth. Over the years, bits have been developed, but these slopes are very steep-sided and have been left pretty much untouched. It's a bit of a wildlife jewel with sparrowhawks overhead. This one's scaring off the local pigeons. In the trees and scrub, blackcaps nest and constantly sing. On the little path that wends through the land, a juvenile robin gathers food. The Remmers want to create even more public access, but it comes at a price. Sam and Sid, together with many locals, spent a weekend picking up tons of rubbish.
So 2 tons of rubbish so far?
Yes.
And you're still picking it up?
Not as much as before. We've got the bulk of it out, but there's still things like, historic rubbish, kids walking through, dropping crisp packets, but nothing too major now.
And I guess this is, the disadvantage, isn't it, of an urban site?
Yes, it is. But to be honest, it's just nice to be in the woods.
Much of the site is woodland that's run riot.
Congratulations, Sid, you bought a jungle. It is amazing. What are your plans for it?
Well, the woodland side of it, what we'd like to do is open it up, put a few paths in, make it accessible to the local children. I think it should be part of the childhood playing here rather than street corners, etc. We'll have to be careful to manage it to make sure that they coordinate with the wildlife so that they're not upsetting each other. But I think with the right management, we've got a chance.
There's already plenty of wildlife, like these relatively common dunnock. But this is rarer, a bit of a surprise in the dense woods, a southern hawker dragonfly. But it hasn't always been this overgrown. Early in the 20th century, the land was used for light grazing, and there are still clues to its former use as farmland. This is a typical Devon hedge, with classic species like oak and hawthorn. But this is what happens when hedges aren't laid for decades.
Oh, and here's a clue to how clean the air is here, right in the heart of the city. It's the abundance of growth on this wall. So you've got mosses, lichens, ferns, and this stuff, pennywort, which seems to be growing straight out of the rock.
But all this lush vegetation is, in places, creating problems. I went on a tour with wildlife expert Dr. David Dixon.
You know, we've just come out of the shade of the trees, and what you see immediately is this fantastic profusion of ground flora, you know, lots and lots of plants. What we've got brambles, we've got bindweed, we've got sorrel, there's a load of stuff, buttercups on the ground there, all sort of competing each other for the light. Tremendous. This is what you need to do in a place like this. Open it up, keep the trees back, and then you get all these wonderful plants.
Whereas down here, it's a very different story, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Once you get under the tree cover, you lose all that profusion of plants. All you've got is just some ivy
everywhere,
a few docks, not very much at all. So what you need to do is open this up, and instantly you create the potential for much more biodiversity.
Creating light and space for wildflowers will have a big bonus. It'll bring in insects like bees, so vital for the overall health of the site. But there's one big green problem growing here.
Now, believe it or not, until just a few months ago, this bracken was down at ankle level. It's a real problem. It's of little wildlife value. Up here, the bracken takes all the sunlight and shoots up. But down here, well, there's little sunlight getting in there, and so there are few flowers. Time to give it a bit of a hammering.
This is bracken bashing. Crushing the top part of the plant is really effective in killing it off. Breaking the stems stops spores being released later in the summer. This year's growth will die off and not completely regenerate. It's hard work, but at the end of it all, there's already a difference. The willow herb is really thriving, and with it insects. These in turn bring in the birds, like this chiffchaff, maybe on its second brood and still singing in mid-July. And this wren hidden amongst the leaves. The overgrown fields abound in elderflower. This bullfinch is perching among the bushes, and that gives a big clue to the presence of a classic British mammal that David Dixon told me more about.
Now, this is a familiar looking bush.
Yeah, this is elder, and they're really popular with badgers.
Right.
And badgers eat them, and then they defecate them where their latrines are, and then up comes the elder. So it's a really good indicator of where you've got badgers in the area.
Great, so a big clue. What we'd really like to do is to see them, to film them if possible.
Right. And
Do you think we can do that?
We can do that, definitely.
Fantastic.
The plan is to put up a camera near a set and use some enticing bait.
So this is your cunning invention here.
It is,
Right.
That's right. I've drilled some holes in this log,
Yeah.
and I'm now going to fill them with this flapjack mix.
What is in it?
Well, it's a mixture of porridge, syrup, peanuts, and a few mealworms.
Yeah.
But badgers really love it.
At first, David's cameras record daylight scroungers, like this family of magpies. And as night falls, the first nocturnal animals emerge, like this little field mouse. And eventually, David's got something to show Sam.
So, look, there's a badger pulling away the log to expose the food that I hid underneath.
Okay. And do we know whether this is a male or a female?
Well, that, looking at the shape of the head and all that muscle, I'd say that's definitely a male.
Okay.
So that's the boss. That's the boss badger around here. Now, in contrast, less muscle on the head of this one. This is his wife,
She's lovely.
and she's pulling food out from a hole in the log there. And you can see she's really working away at that with her claws, and actually eating the flapjack mixture off her long front claws. So we like to get our badgers to actually work for their dinner here.
So, should we be doing things to look after them and protect them, or what's the best thing we can do as humans?
The best thing that you can do as humans is basically leave them alone and leave them an area that when you make your clearings, that's perfect for badgers because they feed primarily on earthworms.
But the badgers aren't the only mammals trying to burrow underground here. Sam and Sid think the best way of protecting the wildlife is living on site by building an eco-home, but they need permission.
We'll do the best that we can with this land, regardless of the outcome. At the end of the day, it's our woods now. We've taken on that responsibility and we've got badgers to look after.
And I mean, there might not be a commercial impulse behind this, but if you got planning permission for a home, potentially you're increasing the whole value of what you've got here.
It only has value if we come to sell it. We have no intentions whatsoever of selling. This is where we'll retire and die.
At the moment, they're in the best of health, and Sam and Sid want both woods and wildlife to stay that way as well.
To be in the middle of a city and then to walk half a mile down the road and be in the middle of 10 acres of just stunning land is incredible.